Kia ora, friends.
Kia ora.
Hi. So we, as promised, well, it's promised on one platform. I don't know where you're watching this.
We promise each other to do this video.
We promise each other we do this video. We're promising you now that we're just going to get into a couple of things, well, three things particularly, that we thought we would share that are, I guess, we've turned some challenges into strength in our relationship, in our marriage, in our business partnership. Mark and I are not just husband and wife, we work together, we play together, we're best mates, and
we do videos together,
as you guys know. And the thing is, I guess I'm pretty much neurotypical and Mark is neurodiverse. So how do the two come together? We thought we would do this video just to share with you a few things that we've learned along the way that hopefully will be useful to you if you find yourself either whichever end of the spectrum you're at, and negotiating relationships, which are always kind of tricky anyway.
And we're going to keep it short and snappy. So if you don't know what neurotypical and neurodiverse is, check out Markie's video, and Gwendoline will put a link in the
description box. So Mark the Demystifier. So exactly, I'm glad you said that. We're not going to get into the terminology, breaking things down. We're just kind of keeping this nice and short and sweet, assuming that you guys, many of you will already know a lot of this stuff, a lot of this terminology. And if you don't, Mark the Demystifier on YouTube.
We'll demystify it.
Yeah, we'll demystify everything, everything we're talking about here. Okay, so let's get into it. Three things. So, as a neurotypical, I think what we've learned and what we've navigated quite well is, from my side, is one of the things is communication, isn't it? That can be a point where, because our communication styles can be quite different. In some ways, actually, weirdly, they're actually very similar. And in some respects, we're not the best couple necessarily to do this. This is my flower from the beach. It's just falling out of my hair. But on the other hand, I think because we're therapists and we think a lot and we share the same sort of language, we've navigated things, and sometimes I think we make things look easy that aren't easy, but it's still valuable to share what we've learned. So coming back to my point, communication, Markie, you raised this before we came on, and it was something around that I don't feel we really struggle anymore with, but for neurotypicals like me, we kind of make eye contact, we engage, we're maybe gesticulate, and we have a certain way of communicating just because of our brains. Whereas neurodiverse people, sometimes eye contact can be an issue, sometimes facial expressions don't necessarily show everything, in the way that a neurotypical might show and be more expressive in their facial.
There's kind of two sides to it, isn't there? Because somebody with, for example, autism, will find it difficult to read facial cues. Yeah. But at the same time, they can also not give facial cues. Yeah. So my face can be quite dead a lot of the time, and not give off much expression. So interestingly, I'm kind of can be more difficult to read, not because you have difficulty reading, but because there isn't much to read. I don't give many signals in my face. And the other kind of thing I think is I tend to think that I've told you things that when I haven't.
Yeah,
I kind of expect kind of mind reading. I think well, you must know about that.
Yeah,
but I haven't actually told you.
That does happen. Yeah, so that's probably two things. But yeah, definitely. But I think that's the thing. Over time you learn those little points where you think, I bet he thinks he's already told me this story, or he thinks I already know about this thing that he's told me, or I've got this meeting on so and so day, and he's saying it as if I know, and I then will take that moment to say, no, hold on a minute, I don't think I know about this, tell me more. And sometimes he has told me and I've forgotten. So let's just be real and honest. Sometimes it is my fault, but sometimes Markie will do that, and because we're so attuned as well, and sometimes I can almost read his mind, and so I think it's like that's another reason why sometimes you think I already know stuff, and sometimes I do know stuff.
Sometimes you do.
Sometimes I really do. I just know. I don't know how I know, but I know. I'll know sometimes if he's not all right. I just feel it in the ether or whatever. So I think if you're a couple, whether you're neurotypical, neurodiverse, if you're close and and you work together, we do so much together that you start to just really understand each other very deeply, and it changes that dynamic. It makes life a lot easier in some respects, isn't it? So I think that's probably two things. What's my third, or do you want to jump in at this point, Markie?
I suppose in a way it's difficult to talk about neurodiversity broadly because things can be quite specific, can't they? So I think one of the things, maybe might be quite common to neurodiversity in general, maybe, is needing time out.
Oh yeah, that's a really important one.
Not being able to process a lot of information.
Yeah, that's another important one. That's
so quite
probably,
often
I'll count that too.
You'll want to tell me about stuff, and it's just overstimulating. It's
Yeah.
just, ooh, you know.
Yeah.
And it can be important stuff, you know, that's, or it can be just kind of conversation. It can sometimes just be too much. Like,
yeah.
And particularly at certain times. So first thing in the morning,
certain times of day,
and
yeah.
later in the evening, that's when I'm not very receptive to information.
Yeah.
Or not receptive to information I can zone out in front of a film or watch.
Yeah, that's a very different. Yeah, exactly.
But it's not a good time for me to, especially because I've had that all day at work. So
yeah, and we do intense work as well, so I get that, and that wasn't really that hard to learn. I think that would also apply to whatever the dynamic between a couple, for example. I think you have to learn these things about your partner, what they can tolerate, what feels good for them, what works for them and what doesn't. So kind of some of this stuff you could apply it across the board. But I think, yeah, you're absolutely right, Markie. Those 2 points are important. I'm just trying to think. I think the reason why, and again, if you're someone who's maybe on the verge of entering into a relationship with someone who maybe is you're neurotypical and they're neurodiverse, or vice versa, but one of the things to think about is where you are. Even though you're not necessarily exactly the same the way you think and the way your brains are, I think we're a good fit in that respect, and just those points that Markie's raised, because I actually love my freedom. I'm really independent. I do a lot of things by myself, for myself. I'm not super needy as a person. So I think if I was, that would be a lot harder. That would be really tricky for Mark. But that it works for us really well, because I really value my freedom and my space and my privacy, even in a relationship. Obviously it's very different what you're talking about in terms of in that respect. But yeah, I think you have to think about these things, because if we were really different on that point, that would be really difficult. I think.
Yeah.
I think we really respect each other's boundaries and space. So yeah.
And we both like a lot of time out as
we
well.
do.
We're not great. We're not big on social stuff. We do it in very short doses.
Yeah, exactly. We went to a party last night, and we went and we kind of really put some boundaries around it, because I think sometimes there's an expectation just socially, and this is not necessarily neurotypical neurodiverse stuff, just in general in life. You find, you're invited to something and there's sort of an expectation you're going to get pissed and you're drunk and you're going to be leery and loud and stuff, and there's all these social things that are kind of, at least in my world and where I've grown up, these are sort of implicit expectations, and we're not all made like that. We don't all enjoy getting drunk, and we don't even drink really. So I think it's important as a couple, it's important as an individual that you understand where you need to draw those lines, I think. So absolutely.
I think the other thing worth saying is that when we got together, we weren't really aware of the neurodiversity, were we?
No, we weren't.
I was aware of some. I knew I was dyspraxic. I didn't know I was anything else.
Yeah.
And then I kind of, by degrees, I realised that I was everything else. I went through the whole list pretty much.
Yeah.
Dyslexia, I think, is the only one I haven't got.
Right. Yeah. That's quite interesting that you don't have that. Yeah.
And I suppose the fact that we're both psychotherapists and we're both kind of very in touch with information, good information, and we were
and emotions, and
we were quite quick to educate ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I think the problem with neurodiversity is a lot of the behaviours. I mean, I've just done a series on social skills for people with.
Yes, you have. Yeah.
We're still going actually. There's more episodes coming, and a lot of it is talking about really how often neurodiverse people come across as really obnoxious and rude, or selfish, or narcissistic.
Absolutely.
Sometimes they are narcissistic, but sometimes they just appear narcissistic because so lack of understanding. So basically, if you don't know why we do what we do, we can really ignorant, selfish, rude people.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm distracted by a dog that looks like our dog.
Oh right, okay, it's a good omen.
Yeah.
So
we were just talking about him.
I'm the one with ADHD, and look who's the neurotypical person is getting distracted.
I think that's maybe the third point. I mean, I wasn't going to say this, but I remember actually I used to have a student of mine who I believe one of their children was autistic, and she would tell me quite often that in her education around the subject, because of her son, I think it was, But she'd come to realize that, you know, if you spend enough time around someone who is on the spectrum, you become a little bit like them in some respects. I mean, I don't really necessarily believe that's true. It may be true. I don't know what research is out there. But I do think that because there are a lot of places where Mark and I are actually quite similar. So, for example, where Mark is more, you know, you're actually really good with people. This is the funny paradox. You're good with people, but you need that space sometimes to pull back. I'm kind of similar, even though I used to always think I was an extrovert and that was it. But I've come to realize that's not exactly true. And I'm actually very similar. But for me, it's probably more about being private. I'm actually a very private person, despite what you might think. I mean, all the content
I
put out. But I'm actually super private. And so, it's a really good fit because it's not, you know, I don't struggle to understand like why, you know, Mark, for example, might need some time. I am also the same, you know, so yeah, but it's funny, isn't it? You're absolutely right, you know, that, but I think we're all a bit, you know, ADHD now. I think we are all a bit, you know?
Well, I think it's interesting because my ADHD didn't really present much as a child, apart from the fact that I was daydreamer at school.
Yeah.
And often missed things, and I was disorganised. But I was never hyperactive, and it never kind of got picked up. But it's got. I think it's getting. It's not if it's getting worse, but it has got worse. And I think a lot of that is to do with IT actually.
Yeah, I don't know. It's
and the dopamine thing of the constant. You know, things like Facebook and things like that give you constant dopamine hits, and then you
all those likes,
and then you kind of become it messes up your dopamine, and then that makes it because it's a dopamine thing, and it makes it worse.
Yeah.
So I think in
some
a way,
of the pitfalls of social media. I think
it's not that everybody's becoming ADHD, but everyone's becoming kind of pseudo ADHD because of the dopamine effects of these constant stimulation.
Yeah.
Somebody said, I read something that I can't remember the figures now, but if you compare the pieces of information that we're bombarded with on a daily basis, and compare that with somebody from the Middle Ages, and they probably had about 5 pieces of information to process a day, whereas we have something like kind of 10,000.
Or like 5 a second, 5 a minute. You know?
And that's kind of, you know, that kind of does your head in on some level, but also the kind of, I mean, Facebook, things like that. If you look at how they work psychologically, it's what, like in transactional analysis, you call a stroke. You know, you get recognised, which gives us a buzz, gives us a dopamine hit, and therefore we crave that even more, like laboratory rats. And that's really bad for someone with ADHD because they've already got the problems with dopamine anyway. So we're at a disadvantage. So modern, I think, you know, computers have been, you know, great for me in many ways, but in lots of ways, I'd quite like to go back to the
Stone Age.
Yeah, no, well, maybe the Stone. I was going to say the 80s, but I hated the 80s. So I mean, I was a child in the 70s, but I kind of like my fantasies go back to the 70s where things were simpler. There was less stimulation.
Yeah,
I'd have to detox from stimulation.
Yeah, you would have to have
I'd be climbing the walls for probably about a month.
More than that.
With was it 2 television channels or 3?
Yeah,
I think it was 3 back
2
then.
or 3. Yeah, right.
But yeah, I think modern life can make these things worse. So the good thing is there's good information around.
There's amazing information.
That's what's made our lives much more easy because I think the great thing about you is you understand and you're very tolerant. And when I do stuff, you think, oh yeah, that's. I'd like if I
doesn't faze me.
If I leave lights on, I'm always leaving lights on, things like that. That's ADHD.
Yeah.
And you know, you do kind of bust my chops about that to a degree, but to like you also kind of hold off and think, you know, there's a sense of sort of acceptance that it's annoying.
Absolutely.
You know, that's how it's probably going to be.
Absolutely.
You know?
And also don't sweat the small stuff. I think that's the key thing, really. I think that, that's probably the key takeaway is basically don't sweat the small stuff in marriage in general, but you know, particularly if you are a mix of neurotypical and neurodiverse. So how do we wrap this up? Do you have any final thoughts?
So what are the key things really? There's sort of education, information, tolerance, acceptance.
Patience.
Don't sweat the small stuff.
Don't sweat the small stuff.
Don't take offence, I would say.
Yeah.
So it's very easy to take offence at a lot of things that neurodiverse people will say and do.
That is true.
But if you know them and you know where they're coming from, it's like I've got some friends that are neurodiverse and they can be very funny, very ornery, very difficult. But when I know that, I just accept it.
Yeah.
And I just take them for what they are. I don't expect them to be any different. It's when people expect you to be different.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's not fair, really. You know, that's just not fair because we are different. We are differently wired, and we have to learn how to play to the strengths that we both have. And you know, we really do have really loads of strength. I think the other test of fire that we had, of course, was me doing my master's degree in the quite early stages of our relationship, and it meant that I mean, you know, we were both under duress because we were both, and it was just tough, you know. And we were working. It wasn't like, you know, we were just sitting back and living the life of Riley, and I happened to be doing a master's in my spare time. And it was a really intense training. It was for my psychotherapy training. So I think if you have a trial by fire like that and you survive it, and not only survive, but you thrive as a result of the kind of determination really and tenacity that you discover in your relationship through those hardships, then you know you've got something pretty rock solid. And then you also learn about each other in a really amazing way. I mean, and really the creativity of Mark's creativity was one of the things that was my saving grace through that process, because it was so hard. As I say, I'm not one of those people who I'm actually, you know, fairly intelligent. I would say I'm good at studying. I love studying. I love learning. But when you do certain pieces of work, certain levels of study, it's just tough. Unless, you know, maybe you've got all your ducks in a row. Maybe you're a millionaire and you don't have to work, so you can just focus on your studies and writing your thesis and stuff. I didn't have that luxury, and there were many times where Markie's creativity pulled me through, and that's his, you know, that would be maybe arguably from his neurodiversity, but it's such a strength, and I could borrow from it in terms of my.
Can you go into the specifics of that, because that's quite
just
interesting.
briefly, because we want to wrap this up really.
People probably wouldn't get what that means. Really.
Well, I mean, for example, I'm gonna wrap this up, guys, because we don't want to take too much of your time here. And if you're interested, then put a link put a note in the comments and let us know that you've enjoyed this content. But I think I would say in summary that I was incredible. I was amazed by your generosity of heart and spirit. Like when I was struggling, for example, I had like a million papers to read, psychoanalytic, really dense analytic papers to read and to present on and give and attend seminars on, and if I was overwhelmed with the quantity of information I had to learn, Markie was very good at finding ways of breaking it down. And even there were times where, you know, you'd make up a song about some theory and it would help it just stay in my mind. You know, I would never have thought of that. You know, I don't think I would have. Funny enough, I used to do things like that when I was a kid, when I was little and I was on my own and I had to study stuff and I didn't really have much support.
I sang a paper to you, didn't I?
You sang a paper to me,
you had to read a paper for the next day, which is quite a long one.
Exactly. It was long and dense and hard.
And you were really tired.
I was exhausted.
So I put it to music.
Yeah, exactly. So guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video. We're gonna love you and say goodbye for now, but let us know in the comments below what you think. And if you are in a relationship, if you are neurotypical, neurodiverse, and you're in a relationship with someone who you feel is differently wired, and what are your struggles? What do you find a joy? You know, let us know in the comments below. But we'll say goodbye for now.
Catch you soon.
See you soon. Kia ora.